Would you look at all of this? Are we in Egypt? Not exactly. We are in San Jose, California, at the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum, which is got quite a few Egyptian artifacts on display, and I believe it's the largest collection of Egyptian artifacts in the western US. So we'll go inside this museum, which is actually based on an Egyptian temple. I forget which one, but we'll take a look inside and see what we find. So the grounds themselves are pretty cool. They really did the sort of the Egyptian temple thing pretty well. And so even as you enter here, it's a pretty impressive building and area. But I'm not sure if I'm supposed to walk on this. Let's walk this way. Yeah, so the architecture itself is modeled after an Egyptian temple. I just forget which one, but it's a pretty impressive building nonetheless. And the Peace Garden isn't quite as peaceful when there's construction going on across the street, but what can you do? Now, Pythagoras was a Greek mathematician, philosopher, astronomer, and here he is holding a protractor in his hand. That actually took me a sec. It's been a little while since I've done math. Took me a minute to remember what a protractor was. Whoopsie. But I think that's what that is. Hopefully I'm right. And they actually have this replica of an outdoor game you can play out here. It looks like it's called Senate. It says, the passing game played for over 3,000 years in ancient Egypt. Quite a few rules, so we're not going to actually play it today. Plus, I'm assuming you probably need people to actually play it with, and it's just me here right now. So, anyway. But yeah, so we have this out here too to play. Okay, so for this portion inside the museum, I'm doing a voiceover because it was pretty crowded in here that day. So here's some shots of some of the artifacts that they had on display, including everyday things like this necklace you see here, which is always interesting to remember that, you know, they lived lives just like we do and liked the same things. And specifically in this Roman section, it was interesting to see up here, there's a portrait of a Roman woman that was in a tomb in Egypt, and so it was just interesting again to see. So again, the afterlife was a major focus for the Egyptians as well. So there were a lot of caskets. I guess they're not technically called caskets, but we'll just say that that's the modern term, that were on display with a lot of the same symbols, including eyes that would look into the afterlife, which you can see here, and of course including a lot of hieroglyphics, which they went into detail in some of the descriptions below, but doing this voiceover after the fact and with all the facts that were in the museum, I don't remember everything that was included. But anyway, again, you know, big focus was on death and the mummification process, including, as we can see, a cat here. So pets were also part of that process. So I thought that was actually pretty interesting to see those on display, which you can see here. Birds, cows, almost anything that was important and part of the life of the Egyptians. And then there's also a lot of scale models. I don't know if they were scale, actually. I threw in that word. But models of buildings. This would be a common home in those times. And then recreations of various temples. So that was pretty interesting to see kind of these elaborate tombs that were part of ancient Egypt. And to think that they were built at this scale that long ago was pretty impressive and something that you don't see every day. Including this, which is a replica of King Tut's coffin, which was pretty cool to see. Even though it's a replica, pretty detailed coffin there. And then there's also recreations of additional temples, and I caught some narration that you will hear now.
It was originally planned to be a mastaba, or bench-shaped tomb, mastaba being Arabic for bench. However, as Djoser became more powerful, instead of just having a flat mastaba tomb, his architect wondered, why not have a series of mastabas on top of each other, each slightly smaller than the last, creating a stepped pyramid? The man who developed this idea is the first architect in history known by name, Imhotep. People were so amazed by the pyramid he designed that he was declared a god, worshipped by builders. Djoser was buried under the pyramid itself.
So they have a replica of an Egyptian tomb that you can actually walk through. So again, another detail area and something that you don't see every day or get to do every day, including some twists and turns. Nothing specifically scary or anything like that. Of course, it was dimly lit, as you can see, but with the hieroglyphics, and I probably should have read what statue that was there, but I didn't. At this point, I turned around and said, you know, it feels like Indiana Jones in there. But as you go on, the actual room itself, which was crowded, was also good. I just did not get footage of it, sadly. So there was quite a bit to see in the museum. Unfortunately, I got hungry towards the end, which always seems to happen at museums. You walk around for a while and you get pretty hungry, so I had to leave a little bit earlier. There were some people who were reading sort of like everything, which was good for them, but very difficult to do because it was a pretty, there was a lot of artifacts and a lot of things to read. But I think the key takeaways were that the Egyptians took death pretty seriously. It was like you live your life, but you really focus a lot on the afterlife. Funerals were a large part of their, whole existence was building around making coffins and, preparing for the afterlife, basically. So that to me was pretty interesting, and also just seeing like in the daily life, you forget that people 4,000 years ago lived just like us now in a lot of regards. In terms of that board game we saw, they like to have board games, entertain themselves, did care about their homes. The wealthy people did a lot to have ornate homes, and especially homes in the afterlife in their temples. So pretty interesting. I mean, you could spend easily a whole day here if you wanted to read everything. I spent a couple hours, but there is quite a bit to see and read, and if you're into archaeology and ancient Egypt, I definitely would recommend this museum because, in fact, there was like a young person in there who was interested in archaeology and reading everything, so would recommend it. There's quite a bit to see. Apparently there's a planetarium here as well, but I did not check that out. But yeah, overall pretty interesting, pretty nice setting. Even these grounds are very nice, as we saw earlier. So I would recommend this, the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum in San Jose. Now for me, the more interesting things are these architectural recreations, which we see here. This one has a pretty good view this way of a pond, fountain. But I don't know, I like the kind of like living, breathing aspect and these recreations. Just walking outside out here, to me, these are the sort of coolest aspects. But again, it just depends on your perspective and what you're looking for when you come to a museum. I thought it was pretty neat that they have these kind of recreations of either temples or gardens, and had I known a little more about what I was walking through, I would talk about those, but again, still pretty cool that they have this. All right, time to head back to the yield car. There we go. But yeah, it was pretty cool. I'd recommend checking it out, especially if you're into archaeology or ancient Egypt. I did find it was very quiet in there, so that's why I did narration, as you might have seen. I haven't done it yet, but by the time this is edited, I did narration for the inside because I thought I could speak to some of the artifacts they had in there, but it was super quiet, so that would have been pretty awkward. So I figured I'd just do some narration. But very cool collections. I should have stayed longer. Again, it's time for me to go eat because I am starved. I ate breakfast very early this morning. Got up earlier than I should have, so that's that. But again, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more vlogs. Sometimes I'll go travel places. Sometimes you see before we film for the comedy channel. Sometimes you see us just hanging out. But anyway, that's the mix of the vlogs. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Maybe if you make it to San Jose, feel free to visit this museum. It was $8 for the general admission, so pretty affordable. And again, you could stay for hours if you wanted to. I was here for a little over an hour, I think. I think I said 2 hours earlier, but it was over an hour, roughly. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe, as I might have mentioned earlier. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.